All right, good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, May 26, 2026. It's just after 5:30 p.m., and this is a public meeting of West Bend Joint School District Number 1. More than 24 hours prior to the meeting, notice of the time, place, date, and subject matter of this meeting was posted at the entrance doors of the Education Service Center and on the district website. It was also sent to the West Bend Community Memorial Library, the Daily News, WRYU, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and other media sources that have requested notice of our meetings. And I'll ask Superintendent Wimmer to confirm this meeting was properly posted.
Yes, it was.
Okay, thank you. Please rise and join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We recognize a quorum of our board. All 7 members are present. Next on our agenda is to consider approval of this agenda, which was posted in advance. I would move to approve this agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. Motion and second to approve the agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We move to public participation. I have no public participation comment cards, so we will move to our consent agenda. On our consent agenda, we have minutes of the May 11, 2026 regular board meeting and executive session. We have 8 contracts for approval, no resignations, no retirements. We have an after-school club vendor authorization, contracted speech and language services, an interagency agreement for deaf and hard of hearing services, Cooperative Educational Service Agency, or CESA, service agreements, a grade 6 through 8 English language arts resource recommendation. I believe those are all the items on the consent agenda. Any questions or discussion on any of the consent agenda items? Hearing none, I would move to approve this consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Melanie. We have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We move then directly to reports and the policy committee report. And I have my policy committee report right here because the policy committee met immediately prior to tonight's board meeting, and as part of the organizational discussion, I'll continue to serve as chair, and Mr. Jenkins has agreed to serve as vice chair of the committee, and thank you for that. We also discussed the policy cycle for review and our meeting schedule for the upcoming year. We discussed for a bit the requirements of Wisconsin Act 89, and that requires school boards to adopt a staff and students relation policy by September 1 of this year. WASB has provided preliminary language for us to review and is also going to have some revised language for us to consider, so we'll be taking that up in the near future. We also began reviewing the 300 series policies related to instruction, and so that work is going to come at future board meetings, and we thank the curriculum committee because I believe you folks are going to be taking a look at some of the policy review work on several of those, so we appreciate your help with that. I don't know, Superintendent Ware, if you wanted to say more. You look like you drew breath there.
Well, I'm just chuckling. So they actually they did a preliminary review. We went through all the language, fine-tuning, cleaning up for alignment, a lot of formatting issues, et cetera. There's several in the area of instruction that'll go back through committee, but we were wanting to get a wider net of feedback with students, with staff, with our counselors, that utilize those. There's things like weighted grades, graduation, all of those things. So those have a little more meat to the discussion. So once we get that input from that wider range, it'll actually come back to curriculum committee, and then they'll winnow through those. When they're ready, then our friends in policy will look at language, et cetera. But any of those that have substantive change around potential practice, et cetera, have to go to that committee first.
Great, thank you. Then also, the athletic handbook discussion and policies regarding student transportation and facilities are on this evening's agenda for a first reading by the board. That would conclude my report. Any questions regarding the policy committee report? All right, hearing none, we'll move to the construction report. And Tim Harder, our Director of Facilities and Technology, is approaching the podium and will walk us through this report. Good evening to you.
All right, good evening, board members. I'll be very brief. Since the last time I've been here, we continue work at Jackson. The only update that I have for you is we have started demolition in Badger's locker room and started pulling wire at this point in time. So not a ton has happened in the last week and a half, but we look forward to that work and continuing to work at Badger as the rest of the school year ends out at that point.
Great, thank you. Any questions, board members, regarding the report? We appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Thank you. We move to our superintendent's report. Superintendent Wimmer.
So it's a very busy time of year, a lot to celebrate, not just with our recognition and retirements for our staff, but also culminating projects for our students. So last week, we celebrated 20 seniors who completed Project Lead the Way Biomedical Science program. That program includes 4 courses and culminates in a final senior project. So many of those students are actually going to be pursuing careers in the medical field, and future doctors, nurses, other healthcare professions. So we were able to celebrate them. They get their white lab coat as they complete that program. We also celebrated 45 seniors who completed youth apprenticeship this school year. The Youth Apprenticeship Program provides a work-based learning experience, requires students to complete at least 450 hours of employment throughout the school year. So students can choose from a wide range of career areas and interests. At the celebration event, 8 students formally signed commitments to continue full-time employment with their youth apprenticeship employers, while 2 additional students committed to continuing their training through their adult post-high school apprenticeship programs too. So many of the students are continuing, whether it's 4-year colleges, technical schools, they're leaving us with a significant advantage. So they've got valuable hands-on experience, they have developed workplace skills and professional practice. So we're thankful for the students, but we're thankful for those community employers who made that possible. So if anyone's interested, I'll give a shameless plug. If you're interested in hosting a student through youth apprenticeship or job shadowing, just reach out, we'll help you get connected to the right people. Also, this week brings several exciting events. So the kickoff of the AP Art Show started today, and they'll have a special evening this Thursday where you can meet artists from 4 to 7 p.m. at the high school gallery. They kind of targeted that so that if you spent Thursday evening at the high school, you could take in several events. So that will also be our seniors honors ceremony starting at 4:15 in the auditorium, and a military signing at 5:30 in the library. So if you visit campus this Thursday, there's a lot going on. And then an exciting culminating event is this Friday. It's the Grad Walk, where our graduating seniors will don their cap and gowns and go and visit the schools of their youth to say thank you and be celebrated for their accomplishments. Speaking of accomplishments, Bella Downs is no stranger to the board. She is our high school representative and a junior at East, and she has received the Spirit Award through the Jerry Awards program for her portrayal of Anne Boleyn in Six, the musical. So the Jerry Awards recognize and honor excellence in Wisconsin high school musical theater productions, and the Spirit Award specifically recognizes someone who demonstrates outstanding passion, positivity, and dedication to their theater community. So in addition to that award, 2 other honors for Six, the musical, went to production team members, Rich Hawthorne for outstanding scenic design, and Blaine Rakowski for outstanding lighting design. So congratulations to all of those in their involvement. Looking ahead, East and West graduations. East will take place, I know, June 7th. I'm not saying it. East High School at 1 p.m. on Sunday, and West High School at 4:30 that same day, again, Sunday, June 7th. And the last day, even though we're going to let our seniors go a little early, everyone else needs to still come to school. Their last day is Tuesday, June 9th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Board members, any questions regarding Superintendent Wimmer's report? All right, thank you. Hearing none, we move to our action items. We start with Employee Health Clinic Agreement, and we're going to invite 2 members to the podium, Sarah Leatherman, our Director of Human Resources, and Lenny Hansen, our Assistant Superintendent. And they'll be approaching the podium. Dr. Temez.
For this, to avoid any potential conflict of interest, I'm going to recuse myself from the vote, but I'm also going to recuse myself from any discussion around this topic as well.
Okay,
So I'm
very
gonna
good.
step away from
You step away. We'll have the minutes reflect that Dr. Temez is absent at this point in the meeting, if that's all right, Superintendent Wimmer? Great. Thank you. I should also mention tonight, I do some volunteer work for Freightert, and so I don't have a financial interest, but so I'll participate in the discussion, but I do not plan to make a motion, or if this comes to a vote, I'll plan to abstain. But with that, we certainly want to hear the presentation. Looks like a lot of work went into this, so we'll turn it over to the administration.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, board members. So Lenny and I are here together to talk to you a little bit about the Employee Health Clinic. So this work started long ago, before I started here. Going back to last summer, the district has been keeping the board informed around our Employee Health Clinic and the need to explore a more sustainable cost for that. So the clinic is a very highly valued benefit for staff and their families. But our current flat fee contract model with Freightert has become increasingly harder to maintain. So we have began a process. So in January of this year, with our Freightert contract set to expire on July 31st of this year, we worked with Willis Towers Watson, which is a third-party benefits broker, to develop a formal RFP, which is a request for proposal, to ensure the next contract is more cost-effective for us while maintaining all of the important parts of this benefit for staff and their families. So by February, that RFP was finalized and released, and in April, Willis Towers Watson facilitated interviews for us, so it was our HR team and district administration along with them, and we conducted site visits and interviews with 3 final vendors. So tonight we'll bring you to our recommendation and how we got to that point. So those are kind of the steps of how we got here. So there are 5 points on this slide, but really 4. The 5th one kind of goes with that 4th one. But the most important things of what we were looking for are pricing. So obviously we want to make sure that our cost structure matches, goes away kind of from that flat fee model and more of like a per usage, which is more cost effective. The consistent staffing and the accurate service communication are extremely important for our employees and their families. I would say that these are the 2, since I've started, have been where the feedback is around the most around these 2. So specifically with our current clinic, there's a rotating staff. And so sometimes employees see different people, sometimes there are subs from other places filling in, can make communication a little bit more difficult. Along with that service communication. So sometimes we've had feedback where employees will call and depending on who you get, if someone's out, you might get different information on what services are covered or what you could be seen for, and that has led to a little bit of miscommunication too. So those 2 pieces, the consistent staffing and the accurate communication, are really important for us from the perspective of our employees. And then that continuity of care and continuity of service really go together because we want to make sure that whoever our people are seeing, that they can communicate with them regularly, that they can continue their care with them if they wanted to, or have a connection with their current doctor, and that whatever were to happen, that there is not a break in service. So with our contract ending at the end of July, we need to make sure that if we were making a change, that clinic would be ready to go August 1st, so that our employees would not have any break in service. I'm going to turn it over to Lenny.
So the contract, we've been on 3-year contracts with clinics for quite a while now, so that naturally ending on July 31st was a good opportunity for us to just go back to the RFP process. The last time we had an RFP around the clinic was 2020, and then we just did a basic renewal in 2023. As Sarah said, there are a lot of factors that we wanted to look for. Price is one, but there's lots of other important factors as well. So what we did on this table is try to summarize what the rubric that we used really drove down into as we tried to identify what would be the most ideal option for our employees. As Sarah said, the pricing structure, we were open to, but overall, we did look at, okay, whether you are a flat rate type clinic like we currently have or a per usage type charge, what is the bottom bottom line dollar amount, right? Like we're open to any model, but we do know that as the district has shrunk, versus 6 years ago when we last went out to RFP for this service, as we've shrunk in the number of students in that time period, we've also shrunk in the number of staff members, right? So it's nice to be able to have a model that can kind of adjust with that. So it's something we looked at. So what we've done here is across the top, you see A, B, and C. So there were 4 initial bidders on the RFP. Then we narrowed it down to 3 finalists based on the criteria that you see here, as well as some others that were on our rubric. And so vendors A, B, and C are represented here. We'll get to who A, B, and C are in a little bit, but we wanted to be able to summarize for you some of the big similarities and differences between those various vendors. So first line is obviously straightforward, projected annual cost versus our current contract. So all of the bidders, including our current bidder, were able to submit a bid that would be a reduced cost, which was certainly pleasant for us. That's always what you hope for when you go through an RFP process, is that everybody gets competitive, including your current vendor. And there's obviously a wide range of savings all the way from A through vendor C. You see that some bidders put forth a flat rate approach. Bidder C put together a per use approach. From an hours perspective, we looked at hours from 2 lenses. One is how many hours a week is the clinic open, and then also like what hours of the day can it be open. So you see some variance there where some clinics are able to open, at 7 a.m., some are able to open at 8 a.m., but be open later, right? So just weighing those different options. We also then looked at what type of providers would be available to our employees and their families when using the clinic, as well as the consistency. So you see in that provider type line, we break down, are they nurse practitioners, if they were physician assistants or medical doctors, as well as are they full-time, part-time. Certainly the part-time nature of some clinic providers can cause some of the challenges occasionally that Sarah talked about with consistency and messaging and things like that. So you can see bidder A was 2 part-time nurse practitioners, B was 1 full-time NP, and then 3 was looking at multiple actual medical doctors, which is something that we have actually never had the opportunity to provide through our clinic. So that was interesting as a new approach to investigate. When looking at the scope of services, we're really looking at trying to offer the same level of service and variety of options to our staff. Those were pretty much able to be consistently provided across the board. Given that our bidder C has medical doctors on staff, they were able to say that there are additional services that an employee could perhaps move over to their insurance or privately pay beyond the typical clinic services if they needed. Whereas when you're working with a nurse practitioner, you're more likely to be, get a referral out to a specialist rather than be able to handle some of those items in office. But in general, we felt good about all 3 vendors in terms of their ability to provide the services our employees are used to receiving in their clinic experience. And then finally, we looked at location. It weighed a little bit on one of the bidders, but it's important to know whether it's accessible and so forth. In fact, the 4th bidder that does not appear here and did not make it as a finalist had several obstacles to it becoming a finalist, but one was that it would not have been in town, and that's kind of a make or break deal for us on something like that. So, you can see there's a variety of things that we analyzed. And, cost, while important, is not the sole driver, right? In fact, I would say great service is the number 1 driver, because what's the point of spending any money if people are going to get poor service, right? So if we really wanted to first verify that service was available and then look at all those other variables, including cost.
So as part of this, we did do many reference checks. So there are several other districts as well as other just community organizations that utilize some of these different vendors. So for provider A, that is our current clinic provider. So we did not do any additional references. Provider B, we did references with Greendale School District. Gateway Technical College also uses that provider, and so does Ozaki County. So we did references with those 3 organizations. And provider C is the city of West Bend uses provider C. So we were able to do reference checks with the city. So putting all of those together, our recommendation is West Bend Medical. West Bend Medical was C on the presentation for the reasons that Lenny and I talked about. It is a lower cost. It does better align with our actual utilization versus just that flat rate model. They do have extended clinic hours, so they offer the most hours, which gives greater access for our staff. Patients can be seen by a doctor instead of a nurse practitioner or physician's assistant, which gives them access to more things. There is the ability for additional services, so they can diagnose and treat things. And as Lenny alluded to, could, if it goes beyond what the clinic services are, can run through insurance or things like that. There are 3 physicians on staff, so we feel that is very helpful for that continuity. And it is very conveniently located, and that is very important, as Lenny said. Our community, our employees and their families need it to be close, close to schools, close to home, so that does matter. These are just really important things that we wanted to make sure we pointed out. We offer 2 additional services, and those will continue regardless of who our clinic provider is. So we will continue with Fast Care. Fast Care is available 7 days a week for walk-in and urgent needs, evenings and weekends. That's what a lot of our staff use when the clinic is closed. Fast Care has a lot of utilization. That's a really important resource for our employees and their families. So that continues, as does Freighter Virtual Care. So even if we aren't with Freighter, the virtual care does still continue, and those are the televisits. So both of those resources are still available. Yes, and free of cost. So as far as a transition plan, like we said before, West Bend Medical can begin on August 1st, which would leave, no gap in service for our employees and their families, so that's extremely important. The fact that they have 3 physicians is very conducive for, our staff being able to see people, be able to see the same people. They have indicated that they would potentially be able to add a mid-level provider, so like a nurse practitioner or something like that, if the utilization needed that, and we would look at that and then discuss that at a later time. And then the pricing, which we've talked about, is a per use model versus that flat. So that is a greater cost savings for the district as well. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you. Board members, questions? Mr. Jenkins.
Just so I can understand the pricing better. 1, what do we pay right now that shows the savings? And 2, if it's per use, how did you come up with the estimated savings?
So currently, the cost is close to $350,000 a year. Now that includes labs and vaccines and prescriptions. Those costs, those labs, prescriptions, things like that, we assume those would be the same everywhere. We just kind of assume people have relatively competitive prices. So we took that out of the equation, really looked at the staffing costs plus any administrative fees that go with that. So, you're around $325,000 to $350,000 a year on clinic cost. So when we, for the bidders that put in a flat rate, it was easy, right? They just told us how much it would cost per hour to staff their clinic. What we did to determine on any bidders who put in a bid that was usage-based is we looked at how many clinic visits there were last year and then multiplied that by the cost of anticipated visits the coming year to come up with the estimate.
And I think having that background is important, at least for the public, right? Because when we look at these numbers here of the annual savings, I mean, it's significant how much of a savings there is for West Bend Medical, which is great. It's a great win for us and for our community, especially with all the benefits that we get. I just want to make sure that we're still comparing apples to apples, right, for both our benefit and then for the community as well. So, thanks.
And what, a lot of those savings come from, in A and B, you're dedicating only to serving us, and we actually did approach those vendors about, hey, is there a blended model where they can provide services to others at the same time? Because again, if we're using only maybe half of the time slots, the other half is vacant, but we're paying for it, right? So, hey, is there a partner or something like that? We investigated those options to see if something could be more cost effective, but in the end, the option C, West Bend Medical, was the most cost-effective regardless.
Yep, great.
Board members, other questions? Mr. Pickler?
So with I was going to ask the cost question, so thanks for that. With the 8 a.m. start time, I know you just mentioned the fast care, but with that being a little bit later, will that impact employees not being able to get there before school? Will it push them more into the fast care model?
That's one that we looked at a lot because we did, think about, so we looked up how many people utilize the clinic in that before 8 o'clock time versus how many people use it and then stay home because they're sick versus how many people are using it to try to, pick up a prescription and go to work. And then we looked at the later hours. So with West Bend Medical, they're open till 5 or 6. How did that affect people if the other, if our current clinic was closing earlier and with the fast care visit? So we took all that into consideration. When we looked at all the data, the 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock usage was not significant enough to look at asking them to change hours. They did share that at some point, if that did become something that we would want to do, we could look at shifting the hours or having them start at 7:30. That would be an additional cost, and we would see how the year went first. But we do think with the additional hours overall, Fridays they're open longer and they're open later every other day and more consistent, like not closed for lunch like our current one is, that all of those pieces kind of outweighed the 7 to 8 o'clock time.
Okay. And then as far as scope of services, I mean, everything you have listed is the same across all providers, but anything specific that is being lost or any additional services being offered versus the other competitors?
So nothing is being lost. There are additional services that can be covered, and we were looking at those. So just additional things that you wouldn't even think of beyond what the normal acute care would be. So not losing anything. If anything, it would be gaining some additional things. And then with that opportunity to, connect that to your own, if there was something deeper, you're seeing a doctor, they can connect you. They also have some other on-site services. Right? Yeah.
I would think the difference is in the credentials as well. I mean, say, in a municipality sense, why do you move from AEMT to paramedic? Because they can provide just a deeper breadth of services. So I imagine it's the same going from a nurse practitioner to having 3 doctors available to you.
I mean, we have the data. There's a lot of referrals that come out of our clinic, as you expect, because nurse practitioners are going to be able to serve to a certain point, and then after that, they're going to need to refer either to a primary doctor or a specialist. Seeing a doctor just is going to reduce those referrals, and hopefully a lot more of those issues can be resolved in office. Just what's within, as Chris said, within their authority to really, intervene upon. A doctor's going to have far more latitude. And then there are additional services already that we are agreeing to include that are not currently offered at our existing clinic. And that's at the cost of the district. That's beyond anything that can be stacked on and run through insurance or otherwise if it extends even beyond that. So the continuity of care should be smoother as well, because at a certain point, rather than them saying, oh, I'm done, go to the specialist, they say, well, here's the deal. This is now more than like a typical clinic visit, but we could, turn this into a more of a doctor's visit, or we can, take any of these paths, so.
Other questions?
Then I'm assuming you need a motion. So I'll just close with, significant savings here, huge value to our staff in both the hours, providers, who those providers are, and obviously it's a great partner here in the city of West Bend. So I will make a motion to approve as recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second. Everybody's seconding.
Everybody seconded. Kelly, how about, yeah, I was to say that one, yes. Kelly, we'll give you the second. Thank you. We have a motion and second to approve the Employee Health Clinic agreement as presented. Any final discussion? Hearing none, I will call the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? We'll have no opposed. We'll have the record reflect that I have abstained, and we'll have the record double reflect that Dr. Temez is absent for this vote.
Correct.
That motion carries. We appreciate administration's work on this. Thank you. All right. I believe I see Dr. Temez returning to his seat, so we will now have the minutes reflect that he has rejoined the meeting. All right. Our next topic for action is the grade 6 through 12 alternative education resource recommendations, and we invite Jill Corbett, our Student Services Program Administrator, to the podium, and there she is. Good evening to you.
Good evening. As I came here a couple weeks ago to the curriculum committee to kind of share our thoughts and some of our journey on looking at an alternative education online resource. And I know you guys have in front of you the presentation from before, so I'm going to kind of speed through some of this, but I'm welcome to answering any questions you may have. Just always remembering that, why we started this journey was ultimately for our looking at credit recovery, alternative education, and some virtual learning pathways for students. We wanted to try to find something that's guides some flexible pacing for students, helps with differentiated learning, really is more interactive, encouraging students to deeper rigor as well as answering at a deeper level. So again, really looking at kind of some higher level thinking for students, and designed to really promote more interactions. We want this to be engaging for students. As we went on this journey, we had a dedicated team of administration, teachers across our district, actually in Alt High School, Middle School, and Juvenile Detention Center. When we went through this journey, we did multiple steps. One of the biggest ones is piloting a platform called Subject. We were doing our current Edgenuity and Subject at the same time. Being able to pilot it offered it to be able to be viewed by families, students, giving some feedback on both platforms. We were able to get feedback from staff, and really see how students were able to interact and engage in the platform. So we're happy we're able to do that. We were able to then do, in April, May, we started really evaluating both platforms as well as looking at other vendors that had kind of approached us. And ultimately, we did narrow it down to one recommendation. Ultimately, we looked at Subject as our recommendation. It really did offer higher engagement and content, quicker little mini lessons that encourage students to engage both in writing and in sometimes interactive videos. It was also offering the course catalog was able to be utilized with middle school, high school, AP, multi-language. We had a range of everything that meets our students' needs currently. And we felt that as staff, it was a platform, although it's going to be new to us, it was easy to navigate both on the student end and on the educator end, which really was something that we have been kind of lacking, like being able to get kids in it pretty easily and understand the platform. Ultimately, we came down looking at cost analysis. Although Subject is slightly higher, as I had shown you for per year license, if you notice, the platform is $612 instead of just $912. So although a little bit higher, does allow us to utilize this with our middle school population. Ultimately, after careful review of the platform, we believe that really Subject represents a more meaningful, superior solution for our students and our staff. And it really kind of drives in with the student engagement. It's a much more modern design, which is definitely what we were looking for our students. It has some wonderful AI support tools that students can use as well as staff. And there's been a very supportive partnership model between the company and the school district. Just to note, we do have a pretty in-depth implementation planning and PD, so professional development for our staff and all that use it. So we do feel confident going into next year. And I would make the motion or action to recommend Subject for our platform for next year.
Great. Board members, what questions do we have?
I know I went really fast, but I know you guys had the notes, so I didn't want to make you look at everything again.
Go ahead,
Question.
Joe,
So
please.
When you
Yeah.
were doing this pilot, were were some students using the old platform and some using the new, or?
Yeah, great question. So we had students on both platforms, and kind of, part of it was the pilot came in January. So any students newer to using, we kind of put on the new platform. We had a couple students that were already engaged in the Edgenuity platform that were willing to try a subject to kind of compare and be able to look at both. So we were able to do a kind of ask their view on both and what they liked, what they didn't like. We had teachers using both platforms as well to like be able to really explore the ease of use on it. For the first time, we were able to use it with middle school, so that was the only ones that were a new population to the online. But everyone else had kind of a joint piece.
And I think you said both the students and the teachers like the platform you're recommending?
Correct.
User-friendly?
Yes, yes. They found it much more engaging. They liked the videos that were short with little mini lessons and then some interactive activities that followed. It was definitely more aligned to our current curriculum that we're using in classes, and we're able to also pick units out of it and kind of create, if we wanted to, a class. If someone maybe missed a certain topic or we're missing some standards in a classroom, we're able to really create that lesson on the side to help get kids caught back up and hopefully return to the classroom.
Okay, so last one for me, that you might have sort of answered that. I noticed the smaller course catalog noted for subject. Is anything
It is.
we're losing that they currently have?
So all the math, science, social studies, and English, it's the same things. It's all the core content that we have. What they are, because they are a newer company, they have less electives than Edgenuity on our current. However, 80% of the classes, at least 80, probably almost closer to 90% of classes that we use right now on our platform are our core classes, not our elective classes. So there are some elective classes. There's also some AP classes, foreign language classes. We felt there were still enough that gave a good amount for students who might have to use that platform. And they're growing. That is one thing they're trying to continue to grow on.
So they'll continue adding is the
Yes.
assumption? Okay, thank you.
You touched on this, but just to help me, can you just tell the story about a hypothetical student where this is a really good fit for them? Tell me about what
Like who that might be.
yeah, like who would that be?
Yep. So our plan is to use this platform in a couple different ways. So one is in credit recovery, so which is what we utilize at the high school right now, the current platform in. The other student would be possibly in our alternative education platform, where we have kids at multiple ages, multiple levels that need, if they don't have access to, a full class of U.S. history at the high school, or they might not have access to physical science. This will allow them to have the full access and meet all standards. Just because, again, we have multiple classes going on and multiple levels in one room for alternative education. So it gives us a ability to give the class to a student fully meeting the standards. The other platform of students that we may use this would be like a medical homebound type of thing, where we're doing some tutoring at home and being able to, you're missing the instruction, this allows you to get some of that instruction.
Great. That's helpful, thank you. And I should also mention, and maybe you did already, the curriculum committee took a look at this, I think, correct? And the curriculum committee, I should turn to our chair, suggested that this should be advanced to the board for consideration?
Yes, that is correct. Yep, they brought it forward to the committee, I think, a couple
May 6th,
stages
yeah.
along the way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've been following it for a while, and
Great.
I think we all approved of it, so.
Excellent, okay, helpful.
All right.
Other questions? All right, well, hearing none, so I get my notes here. I would move to approve the grade 6 through 12 alternative education resource recommendation is approved, as recommended, pardon me. Is there a second? Thank you. We have a motion and second to approve the grade 6 through 12 alternative education resource as recommended. Any final discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. We appreciate your work. All right, Let's see, I believe that concludes our action items for tonight. We move to discussion then. First discussion item, transportation services update, elementary route times. And Superintendent Wimmer, are you taking that topic?
Lenny Hansen actually oversees transportation. He'll speak to the progress with Go Right Way, our transportation provider.
Great. Mr. Hanson, welcome back.
Thank you. So we have been investigating the opportunities for enhancing the transportation experience for students. So for many years, we've had challenges with the punctuality of especially afternoon transportation for our middle and intermediate levels, pretty much 5th through 8th grade. I've overseen transportation now for just over a year and kind of seen how this process has functioned. We have been dealing with, for several years, late buses pretty much on a daily basis in that, with that student group. That results in students being late and to get home. It results in staff members having to stay late every day, particularly at Badger, to supervise students while we wait for buses. As it impacts a wide swath of students. It especially impacts students who live in the southern portion of our district, Jackson or town of Jackson, that southern area, where they can have some very long bus rides. So right now, the way transportation has worked for those levels ever since our transition to an intermediate middle format is we have a shuttle bus approach where in the afternoon buses come to Silverbrook. They'll pick up students who are going to bus home. Those kids then shuttle over to Badger, where we then pick up the Badger students, and the Badger and Silverbrook students ride together. There's transfers that take place in the Badger playground lot area where those buses are, so the Silverbrook kids who come over will then switch buses to get on the correct bus that's going to take them home. Additional buses arrive that had just finished some high school routes. There's a lot of pieces in motion going on. Once they're loaded, then they begin the trek home. So the shuttle, the transfer, especially for kids at Silverbrook, but also for kids at Badger, really can extend that length of a ride. The inverse happens in the morning. We have less problems in the morning, but it is still a longer ride because what happens in the morning is they first come to Badger, unload the Badger kids, and then head over to Silverbrook. So we have a shuttle both ways. We also have parochial students who ride those buses and are transferring at that shuttle location, right? So there's a lot of pieces in motion there. We have been working with Rightway about a long-term solution. Certainly our reconfiguration was going to provide additional opportunity for enhancement. But as you, the board, know, when September, October rolls around is the time of year when you receive calls, emails regarding concerns about transportation. And I can tell you roughly 90 to 95% of the concerns that you hear voiced or that you heard voiced this past September are related specifically to challenges around this timing. So we asked Rightway to put together a proposal of what would solve that. And what they put together really ends up having our district's school times mirror pretty much what you see in our neighbors much more. So you tend to want to be, if you're trying to be as efficient and timely as possible with students, to be in what's called a 3-tier transportation format. And it's 3 tiers because one bus and that bus driver will run 3 routes in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, right? So they'll first go to the high school, pick kids up, take them home, and then head over to the middle school, pick kids up, take them home, and then head over to the elementary school for the same piece, right? So you're reusing that bus, you're using that same driver, makes it much more efficient. With the way the times of our schools have been for many, many years, it makes a true 3-tier busing arrangement impossible. And what Rightway has always been, or even before them, our prior partner Johnson has always been trying to do is make it work kind of like a 3-tier, even though it doesn't, all the routes don't work. It's more of like a 2.5, and that causes a lot of the delays and things like that. So, you know, our goal here was really first and foremost student experience. And then also looking, okay, if we can enhance the student experience, we'd also need to consider how does that impact things from a family perspective and from a staff perspective. So Rightway proposed an option for us that really was about extending that time between when middle school and that middle tier, Silverbrook and middle school end, and when the third tier elementary ends. And really our time between them is tighter, especially for our geography of our district than you see in a lot of places. And that's what makes it difficult for them to be on time. They can reconfigure a lot of what's going on if we create a little more space, might be a more consistent 40 to 45 minutes between each school end time, which we don't currently have. So that led the superintendent to collect feedback from families and from staff members around an initial proposal, which was looking at extending the elementary day to 3:50 instead of its current 3:30. It would have left the start time the same. That would extend the school day, but so we looked at a variety of impacts that would cause and collected that input. While it would extend the school day, we worked really hard to look at what does that mean from a staff perspective. And really what you find is all of our schools have different lengths of school day. So if I'm a staff member at the high school, I have a longer school day. That means more of my non-student contact time, prep time, meeting time happens within the bells. Versus if I'm at an elementary school, my school day is shorter, so maybe more of that prep time, non-student contact time is happening outside the bells. But it was important for us to create stability across all of our staff, whether I'm a kindergarten teacher, a fifth grade teacher, or a high school English teacher. I should have a relatively similar amount of time expected that I am with students versus time that I have for non-student contact time for my planning, meetings, collaboration, those sorts of things. So that was a core goal of ours. You know, this wanted to make sure that this wasn't adding an undue or inequitable burden upon one group of staff versus another. And we've been able to answer questions, you know, really good questions about that and provide clarity around that to staff as they have asked. You know, some of the, I'll just keep going unless you cut me off. That's right. That's right. So I'm just gonna keep going. So, you know, 350 is a concern for families really looking at childcare and things like that. So we have gone back to Right Way, looking at a variety of alternative options. I mean, transportation is a relatively straightforward service. There aren't a million different ways, you know, to cut this one up, right? However, we do believe that there may be an opportunity for maybe shaving that a little shorter and going to a 3:45. It's possible that a few elementary buses at the end of the day might be a few minutes after that, so they need some supervision until 3:50, but a lot of them would be able to ride by 3:45. So in that case, you'd only be extending the elementary day by 15 minutes and not 20. May not seem big, but psychologically it makes a big difference. I totally get that from both a family and staff perspective. So any way that we can narrow that is something I think worth investigating for us. You know, we also considered the opposite. You could just keep the school day the same length, but nudge it later. But already the elementary school day time, except for Fair Park, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it already starts at 8:45. And really, if you're getting later than that, I think you're causing undue childcare, you know, hardship the other way, right? So the extension of the school day ends up being probably the most, you know, down the middle option. But if we can nudge that end time a little bit sooner, we feel there might be some, some good receptivity to what we're trying to solve. You know, I think it's really important that, because if you are somebody who right now is not impacted by the lateness of those Silverbrook or Badger buses, to you, there's no, we're causing a problem where it's a solutions in search of a problem, right? That's not the case, though, for hundreds of kids every day, right? And many staff members at Badger in particular who are having to stay late, sometimes till close to 4 o'clock, to wait for those buses to come, even though Badger's dismissal time is 3:15. So if you're in that boat, or if you're in one of those, if you're a family that lives on the southern portion of our district, which is hundreds of kids and hundreds of families, you are significantly impacted by this. And you're contacting us, the school board, particularly in the fall, but throughout the year around concerns that relate to that. We also looked at options around, could you flip things? Could you move elementary into the middle school to the end of the day? Some might say from a brain perspective, that could be, interesting, because I don't know about you, but my middle schooler doesn't want to get up so early. But The challenge you run into there is how much instructional time our middle school kids would miss due to athletics, right? And I hate to make a decision around just that, but the fact is we don't control how athletic schedules are going to work. Our conference does, and that means kids would be leaving much earlier in their school day at the middle level to go to athletics and co-curriculars and things like that, which means lost instruction, which is obviously a really, that's our core purpose, right? So we investigated that as well, but didn't really find that to be viable. We didn't find it viable to nudge high school even earlier. The high school already starts at 7:15. I mean, there are some high schools that start 5 minutes before that, but I think that's not a particularly viable solution either. So you can see I'm kind of running out of options as I kind of tick through them all. So, that's where, that's a lot of the discussion and analysis that's taken place so far. Now, Fair Park is kind of a off to the side, unusual situation. So Fair Park, for as long as I have been in this district, has had a different school time than the other elementary schools. Whereas our other 4 elementaries start at 8:45, Fair Park starts at 8:15. So that creates an unusual situation that makes the transportation puzzle even more complex. So one of the part of the proposal initially was to align Fair Park with the other elementary schools. And we received feedback about the challenges that can cause for families. This isn't just nudging things 15 minutes. You're talking about at least a half hour. That's changing daycare routines, things like that. So we've also been working with Right Way and had a meeting with them today about, what are the alternatives in terms of, is there a way to keep Fair Park earlier? It's Fair Park's final year that it's going to be operating until our reconfiguration takes place. So we are analyzing that. As with anything with transportation, there's dollar figures that come with it. And, we can investigate any of the options, but it's also important to know what dollar figures go with those. So roughly every school bus that you're going to add, if you're, becoming less efficient for any reason, is around $58,000, $59,000 a year per bus that we run, okay? So if we do something way in the extreme inefficient and they say, well, that's 2 buses extra you're just going to need for that, you're over $100,000. You're pushing $120,000 in cost. So we have asked Right Way to analyze what the cost implication is of Fair Park keeping its earlier time. It is definitely at least a 1 bus difference. So right around that 60,000, it may be a 2 bus difference or 3. So we asked them, rather than guessing, to really work out the math so we know exactly what we're working on. But given that change is coming either way for parents, if we can make that change a little more gradual or gentle, certainly it's something we'd love to investigate, because we already know that the reconfiguration is going to bring change for a lot of people. So. All right, that was all. I tried to cover as many points as I could off the top of my head, but I'm sure the superintendent has a list of them that I missed.
No, I think that what we did, and our goal was to winnow through the feedback that was provided by staff, by families, look at those implications, try and mitigate as many things as we could, or rise to, again, what's the greatest issue? I think that greatest issue is for Fair Park. That's a dramatic shift for Fair Park to go from 8:15 to that. So anything we can do to mitigate that, we're going to be kind of in favor of recommending and looking at. But again, they need to give us a little bit more data. We can do additional exploration of true impact on middle school, elementary as well with them. But we just wanted you to know kind of where we're working and if there was anything else that you would like us to explore before we bring back something for further discussion and potential action. Because again, there's a lot of opportunities. We might have already explored it and can give you the findings, or if you want us to, dig in a little bit more on this piece, then we'll get you the actuals, the number of kids that it impacts as well as. But again, I think it was a really important takeaway for us. So many people, they don't have a shared experience of frustration, and you have 2 changes occurring. You have us wanting to clean up the experience for hundreds of children, but also we are keeping 5th grade at the elementary next year. So on its face value, we do have to do a little bit of change here. So we're just trying to work with people to understand implications and mitigate that.
Board members, questions, thoughts? Mr. Pickler?
Well, I think you did a good job of laying out that there are issues that would be solved by this, and certainly efficiencies to be gained. You know, I'll just share that, you know, my family's perspective, or issues that having a later time could cause. I have an elementary school child as well as one at Silverbrook and Badger. So by the time she gets home off the bus, often we are heading to an out-of-town baseball game, you know, that starts at 5:30, and of course, coach wants them there a half hour early for warm-ups, and, you know, so we're already kind of pushing it in that regard. Or on days where she has gymnastics at the Y, that's at 4:20, and so if she's not getting out of school until 3:50, you know, that's already kind of cutting it close, waiting for her to get off the bus, go quick change, and then, you know, we'll run out the door. So, you know, maybe the Y needs to change their schedule, I don't know, but
I talk to the Y regularly, I can chat with them.
So that's very valid, whether it's an activity or childcare, et cetera. We did proactively reach out to provider partners, et cetera, around, can you switch with this? Can you do that? Because this will be critical for our families to ensure that all of our before and after school providers, that everyone could be flexible, because that's a problem for families.
Yeah, I spoke to both Champions and the YMCA, who are the two providers who provide wrap care at our sites before and after school. They were both confident that this wouldn't negatively impact their ability to provide those services. The other thing I should note, that the adjusted model that was initially proposed, next year there would still be a shuttle from Silverbrook with those sixth graders. However, there were a couple of caveats that improved the process. One is there would be no transfers. So it allows the right number of buses to show up at Silverbrook. So if you're a Silverbrook kid, you get on the bus that's taking you home. That's gonna cut out a lot of time that's lost at Badger when they come over there, because Silverbrook kids just stay on the bus, Badger kids just load onto the bus, right? So that shortens that as well. On top of that, the kids that are going to the southern portion of our district, largely the Jackson area, they would not shuttle. So this arrangement works in a manner where those kids from Silverbrook, they leave straight from Silverbrook and start heading down to Jackson. And, you know, a lot of times people don't realize, people might realize how far south the district goes, but they don't realize how far west it goes. And I've ridden those buses, and you go pretty far out there. They're pretty lengthy rides. So getting those kids kind of off and running would shave off 15, 20 minutes at least off of some of these kids' bus rides. So that's one of the other advantages to this. We know next year is an odd year. We want to find, you know, with the reconfiguration kind of being in between, we just want to find the best option that we can for this middle period until we can really get into that, I think, really more standardized format the following year.
Board members, other thoughts? Kelly?
Just curious, would you be willing to share the survey results with the board just so we can see?
I can add them right into, I'll just remove the emails because we
Perfect.
collected in case people had questions.
Perfect.
But we use our synthesis, but I'll share the raw results as well.
Thank you.
Melanie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as a Fair Park parent, I really like their current timing. But
I think a lot of
understand that-
elementary people would love that as well.
I mean, getting off at 3 o'clock to 3:50, that's a big difference. But like, I understand that, got to make it work for the whole district. But I just want to let you know that I like it how it is.
We can get you more detail around, if we were to comprehensively, the impacts. Lenny alluded to those, the instructional impacts on the middle school students and those, but we can get you a little bit more real data on that.
I was just going to say, it's hard to make a change like that too, knowing it's 1 year, to be like, let's uproot everything, and knowing that it's just for a short amount of time.
I mean, really what you'd be doing is you'd be accelerating the shift, because undoubtedly the following year, those elementaries will be at 8:45, but
That would
shift
remain.
That it impacts daycare, it impacts all kinds of stuff. We get that.
Great. So next steps, we'll see this as a topic again, or what will we see in the future?
We'll bring that back as a discussion item again, and move through it, give you a little bit more of that data, a little bit more of those costs, those implications, and then following that discussion, then another meeting that would be action. That gives plenty of time for us to be communicating with people around process, where we're at, what we're trying to be in tune to, getting more kind of voices around what that impact would be.
Right.
I will also say we did investigate potentially if there was a way to shorten the school day a little bit on any area that would help solve the problem. That's never a great option, right? We want to have as much, instruction. We don't want to have less instruction happening when we're trying to help kids grow and become their best, but we did investigate those options, but ultimately, they didn't really solve the problem for us. And additionally, they could have created a new problem in that we would have lost the amount of time we like having built in for snow day buffer. So there's instructional minutes required by DPI you put in every year, and if we had shortened days, we were going to start running into, oh boy, if you have more than 2 snow days, we're adding days to the calendar or stuff like that, and then I'll really get some emails from people. So
Families love snow days.
except when you add at the end of June.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't like
Up
that.
for
They,
it, so.
they don't mind. They're always appreciative that we have a calendar that has that we haven't had to flip to virtual days, that they really can be standalone. I hear stories from that, being thankful around that I don't have to guard every minute in that manner because a snow day, you're dealing with shoveling a driveway, having to be at work, like all these other things. So to manage trying to monitor your kids while participating, we really protect that of when we need that and when we don't.
Melanie?
Yeah, I just have one more question, and when do you think we would find out, or when would this be coming back to the board? Just because, families, if they have to change things for fall, it would probably be good to know sooner rather than later if there's
Optimal
childcare
would be
concerns and
before
all
the
that.
end of the school year that there's a decision. We've just been really working on actual numbers with the bus company. So I know that they know this is at the forefront for us, so
I
those should be
expect
coming
we'll
in.
have all of the potential options and their exact costs at the next meeting. So we keep kind of going back and forth, what about this? And then they work it through their, it's a computer system that does all the routing and said, well, here's what it spit out. Okay, what about this? So I think now we've exhausted most of the options. We really have come down to 2 or 3 final choices that now they're running the final figures on. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We move then to our next discussion item, which is employee engagement. We invite Tina Van Roo, our District Assessment Data Coordinator, and also Sarah Leatherman, our Director of Human Resources, is coming back to the podium. We'll turn it over to you. Good evening.
Hello, thank you for having us. We, in our continuous improvement model, have a section that you can see pictured here that is targeting engagement and customer satisfaction. Every year since 2018-19, to get feedback on how we're doing with our employees, we survey them internally to see how satisfied they are with us as a place to work, or their building as a place to work. This year, we had 83% of our staff participate in the survey, so it speaks to the validity of the results that you'll be seeing in the presentation today. There are 2 new pieces this year. First is the timeline. We used to give this survey every winter, and then somewhere in summer or fall, we would present results to the board. Starting this year, moving forward, we're going to be giving the survey in April so that it kind of acts as an end-of-year summary of how we did. We'll report to you in that same school year or summer, and then we'll come full circle next year to see how things have changed, improved, etc. The second thing is that throughout the presentation, you're going to see a couple of the questions with blue text. That means that we changed or updated the wording a little bit. So the essence of the question remains unchanged, but we made the language a little more actionable. So we'll highlight that throughout the presentation as well. We ask a variety of questions, and they kind of fall into 3 different themes. The first theme is culture and satisfaction. In this area, every question that we asked, the results stayed the same or increased from last year. Across the 4 different bullets, you can see there's a range of results where at least 75% and up to 94% of our staff either agree or strongly agree with the statements here. The very first bullet is a new question this year, and we were seeking to get feedback if the staff feel that their administrative team communicates a clear vision for their school. And being the first year we asked all staff that, we're very happy with the 88% agreement result. The 3 additional bullets are repeat questions from prior years, seeking to see how staff feel about a culture of positive recognition in their building, feeling valued and recognized, and also the belief that their work contributes to the school goals. So again, at minimum, at least 3/4 of our staff are in agreement with these statements. The final question under culture and satisfaction is an overall, are you satisfied with your job? Satisfied is highlighted blue because in years past, we took some language to try to align it to another survey that we used to give, and it used to say fairly well satisfied. So we removed that extra verbiage, and now it just is a general satisfaction question. And we're happy to report that 86% of our staff this year are satisfied with their job. The next theme is around the employee-supervisor relationship. Supervisor structures vary throughout the district. So at some schools, there might be one administrator. At another, there might be administrative teams. And then as well at the district office, there might be departments with multiple administrators, such as program admins, directors, assistant soups, and soups. So throughout these questions, you're gonna see administrative team language throughout, and that just represents the different structures across the district. The first three statements are repeat, unchanged questions from the past years. In these areas, some of the questions increased their value from last year and some decreased. But again, at minimum, we had 79% agree with the statements provided, all the way up to 86%, so very strong results. The first three questions target administrators' statements being aligned with their actions, giving their staff opportunities into workplace decisions, and also being satisfied with the quality of communication. The last three questions, while the essence is the same, some of the actionable language did change. So the first one, 85% agree that the administrative team responds to work-related issues was updated. It used to say resolves. And oftentimes employees don't know what the resolution is unless they're directly related to it. So using the responds language helps us understand that they've been heard and something's happening if there's a work issue. The second to last, 86% agree that their team supports their professional growth. The language used to be is interested in, and we don't just want them to be interested, we want them to support them if there's something they're working to achieve. And then lastly, we added a new question, and in the first year of giving it, we had 85% of staff agree that their administrative team is approachable and available. We've done a lot of work with our leadership team around feedback. We've contracted with outside coaching. There's regular, almost monthly supports in the schools to make sure that the feedback administratives give to their staff isn't just beneficial, which is what the question used to be, but that it's useful and applicable to their growth. So the chart that you'll see here, the first three bars represent the old language of feedback being beneficial. You'll see the hard vertical line, and then the last column represents the new essence of the question, where 86% that their supervisor's feedback is useful and applicable to their growth. So it reinforces the investments that we've made in giving really targeted and good feedback to the different staff throughout the district. The last set of questions is aligned to a Net Promoter Score. The scale, when asked these questions, ranges up to 10, where all the other questions were just ranging from 1 to 4. Depending on how people answer, they're gonna fall into one of three categories. So if they answer a 6 or below, they're considered to be a detractor, someone who wouldn't make a recommendation. If they are a 7 or an 8, they're considered passive, and we've often found in our extra site follow-up surveys that the passive people are more likely to become promoters. So if they answer a 9 or a 10, they are considered to be a promoter, where they would go out and actively recommend whatever question you're asking. In the next two slides and questions that you'll see a summary of anyone who responded 7 through 10. So our passives and promoters are going to be the data on the next slides. First, we ask our staff how likely they are to recommend West Bend as a place to work. So we had 73% of staff rate us a 7 through 10 this spring. Then we asked that same question, but now we want them to recommend their building as a place to work. And we had 79% say that they would give us a 7 through a 10, which is the highest result we've had. Given the transitions that are starting to happen, that are gonna happen, and the things happening at the different buildings, I think this is really positive results, given how we're navigating the different transitions that are starting already. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah now to talk about employee retention as employee engagement also lends itself to people wanting to stay employed here.
Okay, so this is tentative. So our employee retention changes throughout the summer. And so we really look in September, we go back to determine what our final retention is. This number is updated as of May 12th for our certified and our support staff. So we do not count voluntary resignations and retirements we do not count retirements in our turnover. So just know that these numbers don't include retirements. But you can see at this point in the year, our certified staff retention rate is the highest it's been. It's 98.5%. And then for our support staff is also the highest it's been in the last 4 years at 90.8%. So we will update that for you in September when that number is finalized, but that's where we're sitting right now. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what do we do with this information now that we have this. When Tina and I met to kind of talk about the engagement survey, we talked a lot about, when to give it, what do we do with the results, and then we did talk specifically about those questions. We really, in order for administrators to analyze the data and do action planning, the questions needed to be more action-based. So that was really intentional when we redesigned some of those questions to make them more actionable, so that they can then look at that data. So for example, when it says, my supervisor gives me useful and applicable feedback, they can look then at their feedback and see, like, what am I saying to people versus the teacher thinks it's beneficial, but we don't have, like, what does beneficial mean? So when you tie it to being useful and applicable, then we can tie it to something when they're looking at their action plans, and for themselves, what are they doing? Because really what our administrators are doing is they're taking all of this information from their own building, they're comparing it to where they were in years past, they're comparing it to their peers. So, elementaries are looking at the other elementaries and they're meeting together. And then they're also looking at the district. So where do they fall as a building compared to the district? So they're looking at all of those pieces and they're creating many different action plans. So depending on what they're looking at, they're creating different plans based on those pockets. So we have several buildings that some of the questions, they were 100%. So we had some certified staff, 100% of the certified staff in that building strongly agreed with the response. We also have other buildings where their paraprofessional staff, 100% of them agreed with the response. So what principals will do is they'll meet together and talk about, like, what are you doing in that? What are you doing with your paraprofessionals that they are, like, so connected to your building? And then that will be a part of their action planning also. So they've already started some of that. We've talked with them already, but they're already talking together around some of the highlights from their survey. Another thing, this year that, Tina had alluded to is there is obviously a lot of transition and change. And that is true for the system. That's also true for a lot of our buildings. So we have some principals that are brand new this year, and we also have some principals that have shifted. So at Decorah, we have a principal who had been at Silverbrook is now at Decorah, things like that. So we are very happy to see the results, especially for those supervisor pieces and their administrative team, because some of these people are new and they're kind of learning each other and figuring each other out. So they have some good data to go off of. So what the principals will do then is over this summer, we will meet together as a leadership team and they will continue to look at their data and determine what their next steps are as a leader. So for themselves, are there things that they need to deliberately focus on based on their feedback? And create action plans for themselves that, superintendent meets with them about in her meetings with them. And then they also will develop plans with their building leadership teams for what the building might need, as far as, support, and things like that. So that will be their summer plans. They have a building leadership team then meeting later in the summer in August. So they'll do the work with the leadership team earlier in the summer. They'll do that work with their building leadership team in August. And then they will have their action plans that they will roll out with their staff in fall. And that will be the cycle then that we will repeat each year, with the survey being deployed in April next year. And with that, we open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you, board members. What questions do we have? Joe?
So, looks like, as you said, really good overall results. I'm just curious on the culture and satisfaction, the slide 4, the question about feeling valued and recognized, just a little bit lower score there at 75%. Curious what that looked like in prior years. And also, was there any comments in the survey that gave you an indication of why that was maybe a little bit lower?
Yeah, so the feel valued question, 75% this year. It was also 75% last year. So no dip, and still very positive. The survey does not include any open-ended questions. So part of the summer work, that an action that could come out of a building is if you're a building who's maybe bringing that score down versus a building who might be bringing it up, would have that time for collaboration. Sometimes in years past, buildings have chosen to do a pulse survey around a targeted question that they give just to their staff to say, like, tell me more. What else do you need, want? How would you, in this case, feel more recognized? And they get the direct feedback from their building so that they can put more specific actions into their plan. So that's kind of a common practice and action that comes out of the summer work, but it's really up to each building to design.
Other other questions? Okay, we appreciate this work, and I agree. I mean, the data trends well, but I also appreciate that we're not saying, well, it's the highest ever, so we're done, right? It's just the beginning. So
We stay on it.
excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We move to our next discussion item, Athletic and Activities Code of Conduct. And I believe our athletic directors, Erin Felber of West and Mackenzie Welnick of East, are going to co-present this. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Hello. All right. So thank you. This has been a lot of hard work. A lot of people have been involved. So we're really excited to share with you some updates that we are proposing for our Athletics and Activities Code of Conduct. So why the proposed update? Our goal here is to shift from a compliance-focused document to one that supports student success, the belief that athletics and activities serve as a vehicle for promoting habits, attitudes, character development, academic achievement, accountability, and personal growth, and then also to ensure alignment with our West Bend School District board policies and to continue to be in alignment with our WIA requirements as well. So the 5 key proposed updates in our document focus on clarity and organization, and then the language aligned to the West Bend School District disciplinary guidelines. That was a big one. We worked very closely with Emily Melstrand on that to make sure that everything was in alignment. Responsive disciplinary actions, and then a big one here is the restorative pathways. So you will see a few slides down what we mean by that, and then again also WIA alignment. There's constantly things changing. You've heard from us a lot about sports this year, but with different conferences, different things with the WIA, we want to make sure that we are keeping up with all of our neighbor schools and with best practices. So what did that timeline look like? Well, it started in June of 2024, and we did an analysis of our current code of conduct and did a comprehensive review of a sample of a wide variety of other districts' athletics and activities code of conducts. And again, went with WIA alignment and then the best practice study. So then we move along here, July 2024 through April 2026. We held a stakeholder meeting at the beginning of this process and then again at the end. And that included, it was open to students, coaches, parents and guardians, administrators, and then we also collaborated again with athletic directors from a wide variety of different school districts. August 2025, we had an initial draft developed, and then we had athletic directors and district administrators collaborate. We also made sure to present it to some of the administrators who've been actively involved in our appeals process in the past with our code of conduct. So we really wanted to make sure that they got their eyes on it and they could give us valuable input as well. And then here we are, January 2026 through April 2026, the school district administration reviewed, edited the draft to support the development of the final proposal. And here we are today with our proposal to the school board.
So a few updates to the code of conduct that we want to point out. First being our title, changing from Athletics and Curriculars Code of Conduct Handbook to Athletics and Activities. So we're really putting together our clubs and our co-curriculars with this updated code of conduct. And also improved clarity and ease throughout this document. So currently, we feel that the current code is a little choppy, a little outdated. We want to make sure that it's filled with our best practices, with policies and language that aligns with our districts and our beliefs and values that we hold as well. So some of those clarities can be seen in our table of contents. So now it's easy to find. It's digital, so you're able to click from those bookmarks to go right to the section that you're looking for. We also added 2 different appendices to there as well. So people can see a visual now on game suspension charts by sport, as well as a summary of any consequences or violations that may be given out. And then last but not least, embedded documents into those digital registration platform is Arbiter. So now when parents are registering their child for their sport, they're able to see some pages from our current code in there already. So parents can see when they're registering their child, our concussion protocol, our dual sports participation policy, our injury section. So it's not hidden anymore in our current code. It's what parents can see as they're registering their child. When reviewing our philosophy and purpose, we feel that our current code emphasizes winning, competition pride, and now hard work. And while none of that goes away, we understand athletics is a privilege. But we want to emphasize more the comprehensive, well-rounded student athletes that we have in our building, and their growth as athletes, but also as people, and their experience that they have in our building is extremely important to us. So this also highlights their mental, physical, and social growth and well-being. There is currently no explicit outcomes for participation for our participants in our current code. In our updated code that we are proposing, those expected outcomes are explicitly stated. So we are focusing more on character development, respect for themselves and for others, team unity, respect for authority, healthy lifestyle choices, just to name a few. So we really feel like this can develop our students overall in a more organized and clear fashion. As Aaron mentioned, we did meet with all stakeholders before, especially our parents. So I really, really want to highlight that our parents are our partners. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and that's extremely true here. So we are focusing on parent and guardian partnerships throughout this. So especially getting their feedback, but seeing them as our partner and our team more than just someone who's on the other end of a phone call. And this defines the parent's role when their child is participating in athletics. So
This structures the communication very clearly when communicating to the coach or to the school or to the athletic director. Promotes also our student advocacy chain. So there is a pathway that students will be able to follow when they're advocating for themselves and their needs on their team to their coaches, which we want our students to be advocating for themselves and practicing those leadership skills. And providing a communication chain for parents and guardians to follow as well if there were any issues to come up through the season. So what does that chain look like, and how can we find a resolution efficiently? And last but not least, setting requirements for coach communication, including the start and the end of the season, our protocol, and our district-approved platforms for that ongoing communication to make sure our coaches are following that.
So we think it's very important to us to hold our students to a high standard while also providing them the opportunity to grow. So here is a snip of what you guys have as far as in the actual full draft. But for the violations of the athletic code of conduct, the proposed structure removes a one-size-fits-all. So currently it's a 3-strike system for the code of conduct. So for the first violation, if you're not familiar with it, it would be, if you self-report, it would be 15%, but if you don't self-report, it would be a 25%. And what I mean by that would be 25% of their season of competitions. They'd still be a part of a team, and they're still practicing, but they just wouldn't be able to compete. And then right now, what we have in place is 50% for that second violation, and then for the third one, it's a full calendar year. So what we're doing now is we want to align the disciplinary incident to a 3-level structure where each level represents a different degree of disciplinary action. So it's going to provide the student athletes and activity participants a restorative pathway to reduce a suspension or in addition to a suspension. So they would still do that restorative pathway in order to be able to compete. So this is showing here our different levels. We have level 1, level 2, and level 3. And then, like I said, there would be 3 different levels underneath that. So for example, right now, if somebody were to get a code violation for hosting a house party where there was alcohol involved, and somebody got a code violation for being disrespectful to a teacher, it's at the same standard. So now we'd have a different levels broken down to take a deeper dive into the severity of what they did.
Thanks for covering some of the severity things that you've run into and how things are being treated equally, and they certainly aren't. Can you speak a little bit more to the board so they understand the work that you've done in the region and the work that you've done across systems, and how this isn't us forging a path on our own, that this is in alignment there?
Oh, no, certainly. This is not the Wild Wild West. We have talked to some of the best around the state and who are leading. Some, for example, would be the Madison School District, Sun Prairie, Oak Creek. We looked at a lot of larger school districts. We looked at Germantown, Homestead, Slinger, Hartford, and to really see the direction that the schools are going. So not everybody is there yet. I feel pretty confident in what we've done and all of the work and who's been a part of this, that we might be able to push the needle for more schools to follow our lead after this. But yes, it's been, there's been a lot of input from a lot of different people to see what works, why it works, and think of what's honestly just going to be best for our students. We want them to participate, but we also need them to understand the importance of doing what they're supposed to be doing and being good citizens and beyond high school as well. So that's a good point.
And remind me, I know that you had multiple points of feedback from your families and your students because they need to pick this up, understand it, and make sure that they can be in compliance with it. The draft went out at the end. What was the overall feedback, just anecdotally, that you received from students and families?
So it was overwhelmingly positive. Parents, our coaches, and our students all met together, and they said that it was clear and easy to follow, that they did not feel like it was overly punitive, that it was Oh, thank you so much. That there was no missing behaviors that they felt like were there or anything unidentified. They felt that there was full accountability for our students and their choices that they're making, as well as showing fairness. And that they also felt that there was improved transparency with this new draft in our athletic code, that everything was laid out clearly and being communicated easily through reading it.
So in the most recent meeting that we had 21 people show up, and that's again a mix of some coaches, some parents, and some student athletes. What I thought was great though is some of the students that were there have received code violations in the past, so it was even better to see their perspective on how they would want to see things changed. And then also there was some continuity too between the parents from the beginning when this process started till now, and like Mackenzie said, the feedback was we could tell how hard that you guys have worked on this, and it was very positive. They were very excited to see the change. So, and then now diving into the same format here, but this is your activities piece. So athletics and activities, we want to hold, you're participating in both, but it's a little bit different. With the musical, there's only 3 musical dates. There's 24 baseball games. So it's not, like we said, it's not going to be that one size fits all, but you can see here too, we still have the different levels. They all match. So level 1, level 2, and level 3, and 3 different steps within those levels. So you would have a suspension from leadership positions, competition, performance, and or representing West Bend, or the West Bend the school district. Now, to talk a little bit about here this restorative opportunity, we have looked at the NFHS network, that is the National Federation of High School Sports, and there are a ton of courses that a lot of school districts around here are utilizing. So for example, if a student athlete is being disrespectful or bullying someone, there is an actual online course that we can set them up with that they have to take in order to be reinstated. So that is our goal, to really utilize the NFHS network. And then for the volunteer hours, you will have to still get approved by your athletic director in advance. It would be in the West Bend community, and you have a sign-off process in place, and making sure that you're not volunteering for any family members. Everything would have to be in place prior to actually doing those volunteer hours. And students don't have to do that restorative option. For some of them, there's, like, that's to reduce the consequence, so to speak, but they don't have to. Another big thing, these are all of our board policies that the Code of Conduct is aligned with. And we went through and made sure that it's up to date, aligned with our website, aligned with the WIA website. Everything is fully aligned. What questions do you have for us?
Clearly, a lot of work put into this. Thank you for this. Just a question with regard to level 1, level 2, level 3. Is it based on the offense, is it the judgment of a coach, or is it, there's a big table that says, and I'm making something up, jaywalking, level 2, right? I don't know, I'm making that up.
All right.
I don't want to use a right, a really bad offense, but, or is it based on?
Teams, Chris.
Or is it really is subjective and it depends, meaning because we know with these situations, no two situations are perfectly alike necessarily. How does that work? If someone says, I don't think that was a 2, I think it was a 1, it wasn't a 3, it was a 1, what are your thoughts around that? I'm just trying to think ahead.
I know you have a lot of documents in front of you, but it is actually on page 8 of the draft, or 18, I'm sorry, 18, of the draft. And it breaks down the different level 1 incident, level 2 incident. So for just an example here, for the level 1, it would be conduct contrary to the behavior standards expected of students in the West Bend High School, including but not limited to major disruptions, major incidents of insubordination, inappropriate language, or disrespect that results in an out-of-school suspension, and then, or behavior unbecoming of an athlete. And then you jump here to the level 2 category, and that is going to be more of the vandalism, theft, drug, alcohol, assault, fighting, bullying, hazing. And then your level 3 is organizing the house party, and theft of personal, like phone or phone data or personal data, and charged with a serious local, state, federal offense. So that's obviously your more severe consequence. Did I answer that?
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Other questions? Again, clearly a lot of work put into this, and this is a discussion item. So this will come back at a future board meeting for adoption. Is that correct?
Correct.
Board
It asks
member-
for action for adoption, and then the timing, they would want that in place prior to the start of their next sports season. So,
July 1st is when we would like to implement. That's when our registration opens for the fall sports and activities.
Great. So, board members, we could put this in consent agenda.
could put it as a continued, an action item where you could have more discussion and take action as soon as the next meeting, or consent. It depends on board members' readiness.
Strong feelings either way?
I'm fine with it. I think there's a lot here, and I'd be fine with consent.
Consent, okay. Well, and we always have the opportunity to pull it off consent agenda, right? So why don't we put it on next consent agenda? And again, we thank you for your work. Appreciate it very much.
And if any
Thank you for
questions
walking
were
us
to
through.
come up, certainly don't hesitate to reach out.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we move to discussion around the 2026-2027 preliminary budget. And Mr. Hanson, welcome back.
Thank you. Okay, so this budgeting process, doesn't look much different from the prior year or the prior year before that, right? Budgeting is a process that we go through every year for decades and decades, but we sometimes forget some of the nuances that come with the way the state budget influences our budgeting process and timeline. So I'll walk through all of that, as well as the state budget deal that we talked about 2 weeks ago when I was standing at this podium. So there is a presentation in board docs, and then there's also the actual preliminary budget document for your review. This is a discussion item that'll come back for action at the next meeting, so you have plenty of time to review that actual budget document, which is more than a dozen pages. So first, the question we always get, why are we talking about a preliminary budget instead of a final budget? Doesn't the new fiscal year start on July 1st? Yes, it does start then. So why only a preliminary budget? And that is because of the state and important data points that influence our final budget numbers. So the state drives the budgeting process for all 421 school districts within the state of Wisconsin. The state budget controls our revenues. The state controls how much aid we receive, which directly impacts how much is levied for property taxes. And the state also determines the balance for all districts in terms of things like special education aid and how that is divided out amongst districts, as well as many other factors. Furthermore, our dollars are directly tied to how many students we educate in a given year. That information is known in September, which is why our annual meeting comes shortly after that, where we're able to report what actual enrollment was, and then we have a much firmer idea of what our revenues will be for the following year. So what we do at this point in the year is we bring a preliminary budget to the board. The preliminary budget is a very rough estimate at this point. It really signals our desire to begin expensing dollars for the next fiscal year, and gives a general direction that we believe the budget is heading in terms of will we be able to balance it, what are the key levers that we'll be pulling, and things like that. So this is a nice part of the year in that we get to talk about some of the bigger picture strategic things that we're doing around budget. But as you know from sitting at your table, we've been at this podium for many weeks, many months, talking about that already. So hopefully, nothing is drastically surprising, but I'm happy to answer questions as we go along the way. So before we get into that state budget, I do want to take a moment to talk about how does the failed state budget deal impact the district's budget. So I was standing here 2 weeks ago and I had a whole presentation prepared and I said, you know what, we're going to pare this back because that day they had announced a deal between the governor and the legislature to utilize a large portion of the surplus funds that the state has been carrying for I think at least 3-4 years. We had been anticipating that that deal would pass since that was a bipartisan, the legislature controlled by one party and the governor from the other party. However, that deal fell through that Wednesday evening. So let's talk a little bit about it. It was the front page of the Journal Sentinel today. There was a Marquette Law poll asking the public what they thought about it, and they certainly shared some strong opinions about the state's failure to pass a budget deal and sit on the billions of dollars. So what would that have meant for the West Bend School District? So had the budget deal passed, it would have been a true 42% special education reimbursement for the current year that we're in. As you know from the times that I've said it at this podium, DPI is saying that the state did not actually allocate enough money to meet its 42% promise, and currently we've been just receiving a 35% reimbursement from the state, which is several $100,000, almost $1 million difference from what the state had initially touted in July. The budget deal also included a true 50% special education reimbursement for next year, which is the preliminary budget year that we are talking about. Compared to what we are currently projecting, which is a little under 40%, you're talking about right around $1.5 million impact to next year's budget that would have had. It would have allocated $300 million in aid to school districts across the state, which would have offset property taxes. So we always talk about how, revenues come primarily either from property tax or state aid. If there's more state aid, less comes from property tax and vice versa. In the last 2-year state budget, for the first time in many, many decades, the state allocated no additional dollars to that equalization aid pot, which meant any increase in costs from school districts across the entire state would be borne by property taxpayers. And never before in my lifetime has the state kind of just dumped that responsibility solely onto local property taxpayers. So this was meant as a way to kind of right that misstep. If you're a property taxpayer, you'd feel that way by putting money into that pot. And then finally, there was a $300 per taxpayer tax rebate that would have been received. So families filing jointly would have received $600, and that was meant as a, I think the legislature and governor's answer to dealing with, inflation and rising costs in different households. How would our district have benefited? So I've got some actual figures there around what those special education reimbursement amounts would equal. Those are large dollar amounts, and they would have certainly allowed the state to meet a promise that they were all shouting from the rooftops back last year, July 4th, when the budget passed. I think that third bullet point is really important. So we talk about how when special education first came into existence in the state of Wisconsin, the state initially guaranteed that 70% of special education costs would be reimbursed by the state. And you're going back to the 70s when that began. And then over the decades since then, it trickled away lower and lower and lower until it reached around 25% a few years ago. And slowly they've been adding a percent back here or there, trying to climb it back, but we've never come close back to that 70%. Had this passed and next year's reimbursement rate really been 50%, I really would have think that tends to set the floor for the starting point of the negotiation over the next state budget. So that would have been a really important, I think, piece of advocacy for schools and kids, that now the floor will probably be at either 45% or more likely what it's really going to be, which is like 39 or 40%. So there was a real loss there. And then in terms of how much equalization aid would have been added to the pot, that's dollar figure you see there, $2.2 million would have been added for the West Bend School District, would have been about a 7% increase in our aid. It's hard to estimate exact impacts on mill rate without having all of the final data from the state, but I'm guessing it would have made at least a 25-cent difference on the mill rate, which is nothing to sneeze at. On a lot of houses in our school district, that's more than $100 on the property tax bill. So what happens now? Well, that special education shortfall for the current year creates deficits that districts have to find money to cover, because in this current year, they did not tell us until 4 months into the fiscal year that, oh, we don't have 42%, it's only 35. As I've said before, we have a plan for addressing that, but certainly any time that you're having to deal with those surprise shortfalls, it's going to adversely impact somewhere in the system. Next year, that means special education will be underfunded again, which the state knew when it put that budget into place with too little money in the pot. Additionally, property taxpayers will not have any state aid to help offset any increases in school costs across the entire state of Wisconsin in all districts. As I said, that's 2 straight years of no state equalization aid increase, which is the first time, I believe, in my lifetime that that's happened. No tax rebates for families that could use that money perhaps right now as they deal with inflation. And I can't help but point out that the $2.5 billion surplus that the state has will continue to sit in the state government's coffers. And if they're investing it wisely at all, they're definitely going to earn at least $100 million in interest for the state, while everybody in our local school districts, municipalities, and households gets nothing. So how does our district deal with the state's failures? So our goals remain the same. You saw these goals several months ago of, as we build our budget, what are the 5 core areas that we're trying to emphasize around learning, maintaining our class size ranges as they've been before, having comparable staffing to nearby districts, preserving all our programs and pathways for kids, and ensuring that we invest in all the great facilities that our community has, funded through referendums and through its ongoing maintenance, and how do we continue to keep them in good shape. So our goals don't change as much as it would have been nice and amplified by a state budget deal. So how do we deal with this? So the first point I highlight, because it's important, the state budget deal wasn't going to solve all school district funding woes, right? Expense reductions were going to be needed regardless of that deal. Certainly we could have employed some alternative strategies, but those reductions were going to be needed no matter what, and that's why we've been talking about them for several months. Our revenues will continue to be capped at the level that the state has imposed. We know that for next year because the state budget was a 2-year budget. And we're going into the second year, so we have a lot more predictability than we did last year. Our federal revenues are not expected to see any growth. In fact, all of the federal programs that we have, things from the flow through for special education as well as like Head Start funding, the federal government has indicated you shouldn't, no district should expect any, sizable increases, if any. Head Start, in fact, will be kept flat for the second year in a row. So expense decreases are needed to balance the budget, given that failure by the state to cut a deal. But our calendar and all of our timelines remain the same. So let's look at that calendar real quickly. We're discussing the preliminary budget today. I'll bring it back 2 weeks from now for action to be approved. Then at the August 24th board meeting is when we'll bring the proposed final budget to this board, because then from there it goes in the newspaper and then appears at the annual meeting on September 28th. October 15th is the big day where every business manager is clicking refresh on their computer when all the final numbers come out from DPI, so that at our second meeting in October, we can then really bring the real final budget to you for approval. Key budget variables, these don't change from year to year. Student membership is what drives our revenues. It's on a 3-year average. As expected, we're looking at around 140 student decrease in the system. That's really as we're graduating out a very large class of 12th graders and bringing in, as expected, a smaller class of young 4Kers and kindergartners, really just following that birth rate trend. We already talked about special education, and I've touched on federal aid already from the revenue perspective. From the expense perspective, we know health insurance and personnel costs will continue to rise, and we work with Baird Public Finance PMA and other financial partners to find, what the best estimates are to use. Those are integrated into there. Cost inflation is assumed with supplies, purchase services, and equipment. Just like your household at home, the school district is not immune to rising inflation costs, and we build in assumptions around that, as well as insurance. As you've seen your home insurance rise a lot, I'm sure, we have seen that in our insurance as well. Our staffing adjustments continue through the summer, although we do have a really pretty solid feel for where staffing attrition is at this point in the year, which takes us to the assumptions that we put in. So as always, we use really conservative revenue projections. And this year, with the state budget having been settled, we have a pretty good idea of what those revenues are going to be. We have a pretty good handle on where attrition savings will be. We talked about the market trend that's driving our insurance. Health insurance, we generally assume about an 8% increase each year. And as we all know, households aren't getting 8% raises, the school districts aren't getting 8% increases from the state, but there's nothing we can do to stop whatever, hospital groups and insurance companies are doing in terms of driving up health insurance costs. What we can do is try to help people make, good decisions for their own care that can positively impact the plan and themselves. We, as we've talked about last year, always look to be strategic and use flexible options for where we're going to fund our capital improvement allocations. That's highlighted much more deeply in the budget document that you'll have the opportunity to review. And I'm going to quick jump over. Speaking of that document, when you look in that document and really start analyzing what's listed there, you'll really see two primary columns under each fund. So we really are just looking at our revenues and expenses. So you'll see the the current year's original budget. Now, certainly there will be changes, but what was approved in October by this board, that's what you see in that first column. And then the second column is what the proposed preliminary budget will carry. You will see in a few areas, like the one listed here, since it's early in the budgeting process, we have merged a couple of funds in certain areas because they kind of work in tandem. So for example, Fund 27, which is the special education fund, which funds special education, but also nurses, psychologists, counselors, and several other services. The shortfall that the state has in reimbursing that fund has to be covered by Fund 10. So Fund 10 and 27 in a lot of ways are the same pool of funds. So at this point in the year when it's early, it's simpler to just combine them into one, which you'll notice in there and I explain in greater detail. We also do that in a couple other areas in this preliminary budget that you'll see. When the final budget comes in August, September, October, they'll be separated out into each area as everything will be really known down to the penny at that point. In closing, coming back to that budget calendar, I've highlighted the very next thing that'll happen, which will be us coming back 2 weeks from now for approval of the preliminary budget. And then that'll set the tone for all of the many exciting budget actions that take place in the coming months. Questions, discussion?
Thanks for setting the stage and walking us through the budget journey. You've done that in several meetings, and I feel well prepared for upcoming discussions. Board members, what questions do we have? Any questions? Dr. Tomaz?
Just an observation from 3 years ago when we first started looking at these revenues. When I first started, that was over 100 million. So the drops seem to be.
So actually, that's a accounting nuance that I feel this is representing a little bit more perfectly because that 100 million included the transfer from Fund 10. I know what you're talking about. So those numbers used to include the transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 27 to cover that state shortfall, but it was being counted in two spots.
Okay.
So in the last couple of years, we've kind of changed that because you end up, and that transfer last year was right around $9 million. So when you double count it, it creates an accounting issue. Now, in the audit, you'll often see it double counted, but it's also noted and footnoted as to what's really going on there. It's kind of a nuance there, but I think for the purposes that the board and the community care about at this point, we don't want to do that because it creates kind of an untrue impression of what actual revenues and expenses are. But you've been paying attention. You caught that one.
And I noted this is an example budget summary. So I'm assuming in June, it could be that the numbers are slightly different than what we see, or this is pretty well
The
anchored?
numbers will definitely be different. So, you know, we have put in a lot of projections, but there are a lot of things that are still going to, you know, bear themselves out. We're making a lot of assumptions around when certain costs will be. They might come in lower, they might come in higher. You know, we do generally try to conservatively budget for those increases. There's certain contracts we have that have maximum possible increases. We tend to plug in the maximum when we're budgeting until we actually know what it is, so that we don't plan for those expenses. And staffing is, you know, that fluctuates day by day, you know, as somebody leaves and they might be replaced by a person who is either, you know, makes more money or less money or takes a different health insurance selection, right? So all those things are constantly happening and impacting. So the numbers will most definitely be different by the time we bring them back in August.
Great. Thank you. Board members, other questions? Right, we'll see you at a future meeting. Thank you for keeping us updated. Next, we have a few first readings of some policies. The first one is Policy 751, Student Transportation Services, and again, a first reading.
Look, turn around. I can start us. So this was in the policy committee a while ago, and we started talking about not just updating some of the language, which you see represented in kind of the green and those pieces, but we really wanted to center our conversation around the walk distance. Right now, we are splitting a household. So I will drive by your house, I will pick up one of your children and leave the others behind. That is problematic. And it's difficult to explain. We had noodled through this a while ago at policy. We felt very strongly around maintaining the lower level. So school boards are only obligated to transport under 2 miles. So we could certainly do that. We could certainly reduce our transportation costs. We made a footnote in there by $200,000. We are not recommending that. Part of our discussion was to clean up the alignment, make thoughtful choices as we migrate students into the middle school model, and keep, and we had a lot of discussion around 4K, keeping that as small. That is, you know, different. It's a different day for them, different programs. It's easier to cut that. We could not foresee kids of that age walking anything greater than that distance, and that is current. So we'd maintain that, but it is aligning that elementary campus 5K through 5 at 1.25 miles. So that would give you that alignment and then have a neutral impact, and Lenny can talk about those impacts. And then lining up, as we're gonna be serving grades 6 through 12, middle and beyond, it lines that up. And you can see we've counted on the impact of how many that may impact regarding eligibility. So again, it was thoughtful consideration and discussion a while ago around our thoughts, beliefs around that, not wanting to take simply our obligation and ratchet that up for all kids, but to really be thoughtful around kids developmentally. So we would welcome any discussion, but that is our recommendation to move that forward.
So you identified the sixth grade might change from 1.75 to 2, and you noted
Correct.
approximately 30 students. Would anyone else be adversely impacted by this? When I eyeballed it, I couldn't see that there would be another adverse impact.
So, couple things. So as you'll see on the old distances, they've really been tied to the levels that we divide our schools up by, right? And with us reconfiguring, you know, kind of phasing out an intermediate approach, that kind of creates a need to do this, right? Because if we don't make an adjustment for next year, you're going to have 3 different or even 4 different potential walk distances in a single elementary school, right? So I'll just kind of start there. We, you know, looked at trying to find something that was neutral in terms of the number of students, right? So 5th graders, for example, they actually kind of, the walk distance shrinks for them, whereas for the 6th graders, it goes up a 1/4 mile, right? So you've got kind of different trade-offs that happen that way, and, you know, the superintendent can speak more to it, but in general, across the board, when we worked with Right Way, it was a general net neutral kind of impact. There are going to be kids impacted one way or another, no matter what. One thing to also point out is that there are additional kids transported who are under those distances when there are things like no sidewalks, right? If there's not a sidewalk, that's considered a hazardous situation. We won't have a kid walk, right? We'll drop
Right.
off at their home. Or if they're having to cross what the sheriff's department has determined as a hazardous roadway, too busy or not good enough marking for crossings, those are called hazardous transportation areas. And then the bus will still pick you up even if you're within that zone. So I want people to know that as well, that other factors beyond just the distance are considered when you're determining whether a child's going to be eligible for transportation.
And again, I think that biggest, when you're talking about student impact, it's shifting that 5K, that kindergarten from 1 to 1.25, but it's aligning you with all your siblings, should you be in a household, which is, I think, meaningful. But again, just to call that out, we did look at what if we made that the lesser and adopted the 1 mile, and you can see the financial impact on the budget there.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That makes sense. Other questions, thoughts? Otherwise, this is a discussion item, and we'll come back for a second reading. All right, we'll proceed on that basis. We move then to policy 830, use of facilities, first reading. I believe Mr. Harder is going to return to the podium for this item.
Sure. And just recall that at our last kind of discussion on this topic, the direction from the policy committee board members was go back and add, we had condensed layers of fees, go back and add one that encompassed a little bit more youth. So Tim has done that work for consideration for the board.
Good evening, Board. So this evening you see in front of you a draft policy that outlines 4 groups. It also helps, we go from a policy that has 7 or 8 groupings of people down to 4. Group 1 is existed in the draft policy we discussed last time, which is our school-sponsored or our events here, West Bend School District groups. And then that focus that Superintendent Wimmer just talked about, Group 2 is West Bend School District area community-focused events that are for youth. And then there's an adult-focused one, and then there is a business one. So there are 4 groups that align with that, along with a 4-tiered system of the costs that align with that in a clear-cut manner. It does still allow for the possibility where some groups may host a adult-focused event or a kid-focused event, so they may be in 2 different groups. But the policy cleanup, and based upon the feedback from the policy committee, was to create that youth-focused tier, which is what you see as Group 2 within the policy and also the fee structure at that point in time. The fees start at Group 4 as the highest for the businesses. It comes down to our community groups that are adult-focused, and then go lower yet for our youth groups as we go forward. The other thing, the policy, to remind the board, is it does start to outline some expectations of the facility department and the district around having a tiered structure to opening up our facilities. So prior to this conversation, facilities opened up to everybody. This now gives us priority for our in-district groups. Number 2 being our youth-focused groups in the community, number 3, and then number 4, and aligns those to the pricing structure. Also, and some other information that will go public on our website every year to help people pre-plan. We often get asked numerous times, I already have people reaching out for the 27-28 school year and when they can book. We're not even to 26-27 yet at that point in time, so we continue to try to push that forward every year, but this process, or excuse me, this policy will outline some of those requirements for us in our community. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. Board members, questions? Mr. Pickler.
So the difference then between the youth sports teams / clubs in Group 2 and the sports organizations in 4 is youth versus adult?
It could be youth versus adult. So really adult West Bend community would be a Group 3. Group 4 would be your businesses. So I'll give you a great example. We have in the past had a dance studio that comes from Illinois, and they rent their auditorium in, I think, 10 or 12 classrooms every year, where, I don't know, let's say there was an adult softball league who wanted to use our softball fields. They would fit in Group 3 if they were a West Bend group at that point in time. So it's really, Groups 2 and 3 are focused around the West Bend School District community, just the distinguishes that piece that we were asked for of youth-focused programming versus adult-focused programming.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I know a lot of work went into this, so thank you for that. Since there are no more questions, we'll see this for a second reading at the next board meeting.
Right. The only thing to add, talking internally, we would ask that the board consider for approval of this to go into place as of January 1, in the middle of the year. Part of it being a lot of our groups are on a fiscal year starting January 1. Also, we have many groups who are already in our facility system for the first 6 months of the year, so we would give that time to them to react to the fee changes if there are some for some groups.
Excellent. Thank you for the clarification.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, we'll see you at a future meeting then. I believe that concludes our discussion items. We move then to future agenda items. We start with the board meeting calendar, and I'll recite some of the upcoming meetings. All these meetings will be scheduled to take place here at the Education Service Center. May 26, Policy Committee, 4:30 p.m., which just had today. So, in fact, I'm reading from the past. We'll scratch that one. That was the past. Moving on. June 2nd, Curriculum Committee, 3:45 p.m., and then regular board meetings on June 8, 22, and July 13, all at 5:30 p.m. And we remind the public to please consult the official meeting postings in case the time, the date, or the location may change. Any questions on the board meeting calendar? Any other items for follow-up and communication?
Just the one was adding survey results to board docs, and I'll do that by tomorrow night.
Great, thank you. Any other items? All right, thank you, Superintendent Wimmer. We have an item that is appropriately discussed in executive session, so I would move to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C to consider employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and take any such action if necessary based on its discussion, namely compensation. I've made that motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Zaragot. We have a motion and a second to adjourn into executive session. Any final discussion? Hearing none, this requires a roll call vote. I will take the roll. Mr. Swigert votes yes. Ms. Lang?
Yes.
Dr. Tepez? Yes. Ms. Kruger?
Yes.
Mr. Jenkins is absent. Ms. Zaragot? Yes. And Mr. Pickler? Yes. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned into executive session. Thank you for those attending in person or online. We look forward to seeing you at a future meeting.